I wanted to sit down and talk about the way I write music. It's different than the way a lot of people do it. Me being a one-man band, there's certain things I have to keep in mind when I'm composing music, especially if I want to be able to play it live. I mean, if I'm not worried about that, then I can just do whatever. But I write all my songs around the idea of using a looper, which if you didn't know, I use a Boss RC500, which if I can find a quick picture of that, I'll put it probably somewhere over here in the corner. So everything I write, I use a looper because I need to be able to play it live without a band. The way that this way of writing came about, I kind of talked about it in my last video where I talk about the origin of the way I write music. It's called like beatbox metal, something or other. 90% of the music I write is instrumental rock, very guitar focused type stuff. The beatbox metal stuff is when I'm playing guitar and beatboxing at the same time. So there's a different set of coordination and technique that's taking place during that. But in the case of literally everything else I write, every song I'm writing 90% of the time, I'm setting up the rhythm section of the song to facilitate the lead guitar work that I'm about to do. And there's a lot of stuff I keep in mind because the stuff I write is instrumental. So I'm trying to be interesting on my guitar without the use of lyrics. I'm trying to be able to keep somebody's interest in the song without having words to relate to. It's just my imagination being expressed through my guitar. In a couple minutes here, I'm going to kind of go into my process, which is different every time. I have a different process that takes place from time to time when I sit down. It could be me sitting here playing around with scales. It could be me sitting around here coming up with interesting sounding chords and then figuring out, notes that go well with those. It could also be me sitting around watching TV and hearing something that triggers a whole melody in my head or a whole idea. Or it could be a topic for me to write about. There's all kinds of stuff I could get into, but yeah, I don't want to take too long talking about this, but I guess I'll start by explaining the looper thing. So one thing I keep in mind whenever I'm writing songs is that the build up of the song has to be quick. I can't be taking forever. There are plenty of loop station artists who do a really good job of, they'll spend a long time building layers and stuff like that on stage for people to watch and enjoy the process of that. And that's an interesting thing to watch. I personally didn't want to take too long doing that before I got into the interesting guitar stuff that I was going to be playing. Whenever I'm thinking about the composition of something, the process of building it cannot take too long. And what I do create as a loop needs to be, at least to me, interesting enough to listen throughout the whole song with the lead guitar on top. There's nothing worse than a song that just sounds super boring or it's too repetitive in some way. So that's where I'm trying to use a lot of melody on the guitar to tell a story for you to listen to. So enough about that. I'm going to get into demonstrating some stuff because, let me know if you want me to make a video talking more in depth about what I was just describing. Let me know in the comments, but I want to show you some stuff. So one of the things I do the most often is I will use this technique called pedal point, which is where you play a root note and you start playing scales or notes or chords or intervals, whatever, on top of it to see if anything catches my ear. You can use this technique if you're learning a scale to really take in the characteristics of it and the way that it feels. It's something I heavily recommend doing if you're learning new scales, new chords, whatever. But I'll sit here, maybe I'll plunk on an E like that, and I'll start going like, maybe something in Phrygian. Just trying to take it in and see if anything I'm playing stands out. Maybe there's a vibe. Maybe I'll switch to, you know, Dorian. Maybe the pickup needs to change. Maybe I need to do that, you know? You know? What about A? What if I switch to A and play A minor? So this is something I do a lot to try and come up with melodies, come up with riffs. It's actually how I came up with Vibin', the song Vibin'. I was playing around with the Dorian scale. I was having frustrations with it at the time because I couldn't get a lock onto a feel for it. Phrygian, that has a very distinct flavor, you know. I was getting to know the modes of the major scale. Lydian, that's got a very floaty feel, you know. It's very easy to get a lock onto, but Dorian, for whatever reason, like clearly there's a flavor there, maybe to some of you more than to others, but for me at the time I was struggling with it because it just sounded neutral. It sounded like nothing, which that's kind of what then drew me to the scale even more, was because it sounded kind of chill and neutral. So I started playing around even more with that, and eventually I came up with, and that really stood out to me. I was like, I have to do something with that. So that's kind of how I came up with the lead part for that, is through just using pedal point. There's also times when I will be just in the middle of doing something during the day, and I'll just be thinking of something, or I'll be beatboxing something, and something will come out where it just interrupts my entire flow, and I have to go work on it like this instant. Get my guitar right now. But the thing I do the most often is I just get in, find some chords that sound interesting to me, and I just play. My guitar and I just start improvising. It keeps my creativity up. It helps me search for melodies and find things that sound interesting to me that could maybe turn into something bigger, like a song or maybe a whole album. I'll typically start with my theory knowledge and say that, well, I know that the Dorian scale goes really well when paired with minor 7 chords and major 7 chords, or even just 7 chords, depending on where they're played. And then knowing the rules of that and how that works, I can then bend them, break them, try different things that maybe sound even more interesting to me, or maybe it'll yield nothing. Sometimes I don't get anything out of it. Actually, most of the time it winds up just being a practice session and I don't wind up writing anything out of it anyway. but sometimes it bears really cool results. That's how songs like Dream Shift and Solar Flare and Malign and Beyond the Sky, that's how all those got written, was from me just getting in with some chords and or bass lines that sounded cool to me, or grooves, and I just started playing. So let me know in the comments, was this interesting for you to watch? Let me know. Let me know if there's anything else you want me to cover, or if there was something in this video you want me to get more in depth about, or if you have any other ideas, like just stuff that you want to see from me or hear from me. Talk to me. That's why I'm on YouTube, is because I want to find people who genuinely vibe with me and what I like doing. Maybe that'll turn into some sort of connection. Maybe I can help somebody who's watching my content, because you're definitely helping me by supporting, and I really appreciate it. So thank you. Thank you for watching. You can find links to my Discord server and my Instagram and my Facebook all on the description portion of my channel. So go check that out. Maybe follow me on some stuff and join Discord if you want. I try to interact with my Discord as much as possible. Cheers. Thanks for watching.